appreciate you asking me to do this. A lot of you know me in my role here at Fife House, but I have another secret life as a budding psychotherapist, so it's really exciting to share another layer with the group. I was told by Andrew there's some new people here that maybe haven't been here before, so I was thinking we could go around and just say our names, just so everybody just gets a chance to say hello. So why don't we start in the back row? I'm going to talk to you a little bit about holistic psychotherapy, namely what it is, and then we have some chance for you to ask questions, and also I have a little exercise for you to give you a little flavor of what is holistic psychotherapy. So psychotherapy is a tool to help us connect with our inner self and understand ourselves in greater depth. So it's just a method to help us connect with our inner self in a similar way that mindfulness is another method to help us do that. And so ultimately, what is psychotherapy about? Psychotherapy is about choices. The idea of psychotherapy is that we can make better choices when we know ourselves in greater depth, and choices that will help us become happier, more creative, joyful, and alive. So whenever you think about why psychotherapy, it's really about choices. So we have greater range. So it brings up a big question. This is quite a political question, and the question is, what is health of mind? When we talk about health of body, we generally have a frame of reference. You feel energy in your body. You're physically, able to go through your day. It's easier to define health of body. Health of mind is a different kettle of fish. It's a different thing, because the mind we each have a different mind. No two people see the world in the same way. And so then how do you create a definition of what is health of mind? So really, there is no one definition of health of mind, and everybody is going to have a different sense of what makes them feel alive, makes them feel happy, makes them feel joyful. So this is the politics of psychotherapy. We don't actually have a definition for what is health of mind. But the danger becomes when we start to try to do that, when we try to lump people into categories of how they should be, how their mind should be in any given moment. We open the door to invite shame, stigmatize people, categorize people, and then the last word is co-opt people. And I'll give you an example. When I was preparing for this presentation, I was researching health indicators for mental health. And one of the things I kept seeing in my research was that good mental health is, a sign of good mental health is that you are a productive, efficient member of the society, and that you are able to produce and I thought that was very limited, and it can be, not everybody is meant to be doing a specific task or job, and we all have different creativities. So it opens the question, what is productive member of society? It's open to interpretation. So we have to be careful not to lump people in. And then when people don't fit our category of what is a healthy mind, we use the should word. You should be feeling like this. You should be behaving like this. It creates a lot of problems. And so the reason I put the scale in the middle is anytime we're talking about health of mind, keep in mind it's all about perspective and balance. We don't actually have a definition. And the other political aspect is we each is separate self. We each have an individual uniqueness, but then we have a society that tells us what is health and what is not health. And Krishnamurti, a very famous Indian philosopher, he said that it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And so what he's trying to say is we have to keep psychotherapy in a way on a short leash. It really, a lot of psychotherapy, if we're not careful, can be about helping us adjust to maybe a situation that is not healthy. So I'm going to be talking about holistic psychotherapy and how holistic psychotherapy is really not about adjusting to our environment. It's much, much more than... So health of mind is way more than simply adjusting to our environment. Here are some general indicators of health of mind. Again, take this with a grain of salt. Sometimes to be out of balance is the catalyst to find the road to balance. So we're not always looking to be in balance all the time. Sometimes it's our sort of symptoms that propel us to look for our own journey. But some general indicators: positive self-esteem. We like ourselves, we feel good about ourselves. That's generally a reflection of good health of mind. Feeling connected to yourself and to other people around you. Positive relationships. And this is really important, our ability to give love and to receive love. A lot of people struggle with this because we tend to either generally be givers or receivers, and a lot of people are givers. So to receive love is not easy for a lot of people. So to be able to do both, to be able to give love and receive love, very important. Life satisfaction. They did a survey. They called people in the United States. This is a number of years ago. They called people and asked them two questions. They asked them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your current job? With 10 being very happy and 1 being unhappy. And the second question they asked, how happy are you with your life? On a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being very happy, 1. And they did a follow-up 5 years later, and they found that the people that scored high on both the job and the life, they had better health. And it's not a shock, but it is like how we are in our lives is how we are in our mind is really a reflection of our body. Our mind is a part of our health. To have purpose and meaning in our life, whatever that means, it's not about somebody telling you what your purpose or your meaning is. It's about discovering for yourself what your own purpose is. To have lots of energy, to be able to adapt to stress, because stress is always going to be around. So how do we adapt to it without adjusting to it, like in the last slide? Our ability to focus and concentrate. And most importantly, self-acceptance. Can we accept the good, the bad, and the ugly in each of us? Because we all have all of the above. When you hear about psychotherapy, a lot of people ask, well, what is psychotherapy? Is psychotherapy, is it counseling? Is psychotherapy, is it like analyzing your past? What is psychotherapy? And the easy answer is, well, there is no one psychotherapy. The mind is complex, it's a mystery, and we ultimately don't really know the mind in our society as well as we imagine we do. Ultimately, the mind is a mystery, and so any psychotherapy or any kind of tradition that tells you they figured everything out is quite, I think, misguided. The mind is a mystery, but there are 3 main psychotherapy traditions. Psychoanalysis is the first one. It is Dr. Freud, who came out in a Victorian age, and talked about people's repressed sexuality and people's repressed sexual urges and freaked everybody out because it was a very prim and proper time where people didn't talk about that kind of stuff. And so Freud developed, he was really the founder of modern psychology, and he developed psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis is you come to the nice psychoanalyst, and in a lot of cases you sit on the couch or lie on the couch, and you just start randomly blurting whatever comes out of your mouth. And a lot of times psychoanalysis looks for the repressed energies, the things in us that we don't necessarily want to talk about or feel. And so psychoanalysis really is, let's talk about it, let's analyze, let's look at, tell me about your blank mother, father, whatever. It's like digging the past up. And psychoanalysis was very popular in the 60s. It was very in vogue, in trend. It's fallen out of trend in the last few decades, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came back in a certain form. The other tradition is called psychodynamic psychotherapy. Psychodynamic psychotherapy is the tradition I'm trained in, so I have a bias, but it involves relating to and feeling the mind in depth. And it's not so much about, it's not so much about analyzing as much as it is about the issue that is being presented, how it lives in the here and now. So in a psychodynamic way, instead of, I'll give you a perfect example. So this is very common with clients. People come in, there's a lot of feeling of disconnection in our society. People come in and they sit down and they say, I'm feeling disconnected in my life. I'm feeling quite disconnected. And so in a psychoanalysis, you would say, let's look at the past, let's kind of try to squeeze out the past, where is this coming from? In a psychodynamic tradition, you would look at the past, but you would also say, well, how I often ask this of clients, how's our connection right now? It's the live dynamic of the psyche in the here and now a lot of times. So, it really can shift things for people. When you say, people come in and say, oh, my relationship is really bad, I don't feel connected, and my friends, and I say, well, what about me? What do you feel about our connection? Are you feeling close to me right in this moment? Are you feeling far away? And that really, I find, opens a lot for people, because it's the whole thing of, oh, can I tell you the truth? Am I, should I be polite? Should I not be polite? So it's a really rich tradition. And it used to also, psychodynamic therapy takes a little bit more time. You don't come, with psychoanalysis and psychodynamic, a lot of times you have to really stay with it. It's not just a 2 or 3 session deal. You have to keep coming back, because you're starting to dig, and it takes time to dig, and it takes time to develop trust with the psychotherapist. And so these have fallen out of vogue in our current healthcare system. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the other psychotherapy that is actually right now the dominant psychotherapy in our culture here in North America. And it involves practical exercises, techniques to reduce their symptoms. And it works a lot for a lot of people. You go to a cognitive behavioral therapist and they don't want to know about mommy and daddy, they don't want to know about your past. It's really about the here and now. What practical tools can we use to get you over whatever the issue is? So if you're feeling disconnected, what practical tools can we offer you to help you connect? And it does work for a lot of people. I don't want to knock cognitive behavioral therapy, but everyone has a different journey. Everybody wants different things. Some people really just like the practical exercises. some people want to understand themselves in a little bit more depth. Where is this coming from? Why do I always do the same thing? And so it really depends on you and what draws you. And ultimately, this is a very important point. They've done lots of studies. What is the best psychotherapy? What is the best? Is it cognitive behavioral? Is it psychodynamic? Is it psychoanalytic? Any guesses as to which, because they've done lots of research, which psychotherapy works the best? Wild guess.
Dynamic. Dynamic.
The psychodynamic? No. Combination? No. Nope, not cognitive. I'm going to say no to anything you say. The reason is they've actually, studies demonstrate that it actually it's irrelevant. Whatever the tradition that the psychotherapy tradition, it ultimately boils down to the relationship between the client and the therapist. If people feel they trust the person, they like the person, they feel they feel a natural ease and connection with their therapist. It doesn't really matter what tradition you're working from. Ultimately, it's the relationship that heals. It's really not the tradition. This is a lot of studies have shown this. So what is holistic psychotherapy? There is no such definitive method. That's not true. There is no definitive definition for holistic psychotherapy. Any kind of psychotherapy, including cognitive behavioral, can be holistic if it meets a few basic criteria, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so holistic psychotherapy is not a technique or a school of thought. It's an approach to mental health that cherishes certain values. And so if you could take one thing away from today's presentation, I'd like you to take away this idea that if you resonate with some of the approaches that holistic psychotherapy offers, that you can bring that to whatever aspect of your life you feel, whatever aspect of your life that works for your self-care. Really, holistic psychotherapy is how we approach our own lives and how we approach our relationships. So if these values that I'm about to talk about resonate with you, I really encourage you to take them into your life and advocate for yourself to sort of nurture these values, because they really do. A lot of people love this kind of holistic approach. The first value of holistic psychotherapy is it's client-centered. It is really about trusting our own innate wisdom, our own innate capacity, and our own innate resources. And it's about the therapist following the client on their journey. It's really not about the therapist as the authoritative figure who knows how the client is going to, what is the best thing for the client. Nobody knows the best thing for anybody. We all have an inner compass. And that inner compass sometimes drifts away. When we go out of balance, it's hard for us to know what feels right in this moment. Sometimes I don't know what feels right in a given moment, but it's the therapist trusting that the client does have an internal compass, and if we look for it, we can find it. And ultimately, this is the Chinese character for wisdom. So it's ultimately about following the client on their journey, trusting that the resources are there inside of each of us. The second value around holistic psychotherapy is valuing the whole person, mind, body, spirit, soul. I'm an intern psychotherapist. I've been seeing clients now for about a year, and the more I see clients, the more I realize how complex and multidimensional everybody is. We are complex beings. We have minds that want one thing, we have bodies that want something else. There's a lot of competing energies in us. And holistic psychotherapy recognizes that and goes beyond looking at people as just their presenting issues or their symptoms. This is very, very important. If you're just looking at people through the prism of symptoms and sort of labels, you're putting somebody in a box. So in holistic psychotherapy, we're looking for who are you beyond your presenting issues. Depression is a very, very common example. I often have clients that come and I'm depressed. They say, I'm depressed. And we start looking at that. So tell me about that. What is that? What is depression for you? And I'll tell you, nobody experiences a simple thing like depression in the same way. People experience something we all call the same thing in a different way. And then when you start peeling, if people are open to peeling that, for some people, underneath their depression is this incredible aliveness that they're just kind of afraid of. And so for one person it could be that. For another person it could be something really different. So appearances are deceiving, and valuing the whole person, you realize everybody is unique. This is, again, really important. I talked about this. The relationship. Like I said, the studies have shown that it doesn't really matter what therapy you're doing. What is the relationship between the client and the therapist? And holistic psychotherapy focuses on that. The web of connectivity, what's called the relational field. And I like personally to work a lot in the here and now with people because I find it's a very practical tool. I find that people really respond to it. And a lot of times a lot of energy will just come right into the room. So I often say to people during a session, what's happening in your body? Just check into your body. What's happening in your body? And people will say, well, I don't know. Or they'll have a very clear sense. And that will oftentimes, what's happening in the here and now will really highlight something that could be very hard to get to otherwise. Everybody's judging me. I have a number of clients that really come in and they say, I feel very judged by people in general. I feel like I'm getting a lot of judgments. We start talking about it and exploring, and it comes up, and I ask, well, do you think I'm judging you right in this moment? And sometimes they'll get a yes. Yes, you are. So then it's okay, well, what do you think? How do you think I might be judging you right now? What might I be thinking about you? And so if a client is willing to take the risk and say, well, I think, you're judging me in this way and that way, I'll often, the thing about holistic psychotherapy, it requires the therapist be real too. It's not a kind of fix-it approach, let me kind of fix you. It requires a vulnerability from the therapist because it's all about the relationship. So if I'm not going to come to my session with my own authenticity, with my own vulnerability, with my own insecurity, if I can't arrive then I'm not really offering the client very much. I'm offering the client a face of something. But if I respond strategically, but honestly, if somebody is really boring me, I won't necessarily say, I'm really bored, my God, why are you here? But I will say, I've noticed I'm kind of feeling a little bit I don't really feel myself in the room as much. I wonder what's happening between us. And then it's an invitation, but it focuses on the relationship. Very, very important. The last value that I'm going to talk to you about today is the value of being, capital B, being as central. And it's who are we when we're not doing? We live in such a doing culture. What are you doing today? How are you doing? What about being? What about your being? The part of you that's is not judging what you're worth through what you do. The part of you that is resting, the part of you that is being, and simply is valuable and worthy because you're alive and here you are. And we're going to work with this level in our exercise that we do today. We're going to work with our own level of being. It's a very tricky one. A lot of people don't have a lot of experience with the being level of themselves. But ultimately, holistic psychotherapy really values our own being level. Joseph Campbell, one of my favorite sort of thinkers of our modern time, he coined the very famous phrase, follow your bliss. How many people have heard this before? If you want to put up here, follow your bliss. If we're going to talk about mental health outside of simply adapting to our environment, adjusting, we need to ultimately find out what our bliss is. Everybody has a different bliss. Nobody is going to have the same bliss. But real holistic psychotherapy is going to push you to follow your bliss, to discover it, but to follow it. And bliss and happiness are similar, but they're not the same. Happiness is kind of what makes us content. Bliss is what engages us. So I throw it out as a question for you to think about is, what are you deeply engaged with in life? What deeply engages you? Not necessarily makes you happy, but engages you where you just want to, you feel passionate about this thing. And if nothing comes up in your mind right off the bat, it's a question that you want to ask yourself, well, what kinds of things engage me in life? What are things I want to know? Like what's burning in me that I need to know or need to experience? And this idea of following your bliss is really, really central. And why are we so focused on the mind? It's such a distraction, and one day the mind is calm, one day the mind is busy. Let's just go into the spirit. And believe me, 5 hours of yoga a day, I tried it all. Psychotherapy worked for me as a client. So you try it, and if it works, you'll know it within a few months if this is really coming back to this internal compass. You have an internal compass that is guiding you in terms of there is a part of you that knows what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you might want to try it. I want to highlight the difference between psychotherapy, psychiatry, and a psychologist. So what's a psychiatrist? Who knows? Does anyone know the difference between a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist? So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor.
Yeah, doctor.
Who can definitely prescribe. Nobody else can prescribe except a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are often not trained in a lot of counseling, just so there are not a lot of times psychiatrists are not really interested in talking about, let's get into the thick and heavy issues of your life. Psychiatrists are primarily trained as clinicians or on psychotropic pharmaceutical medications. Some of them do psychotherapy. A psychotherapist cannot prescribe or diagnose, but they can assess. So if somebody comes to a psychotherapist and the psychotherapist thinks, oh, I think this is something really serious, they can
refer it to someone else.
Well, they can contact, through the client's consent, a psychiatrist and say, I think my client might be, it looks like there might be something more complicated here, maybe we can work together. But a psychotherapist primarily works with counseling, talking, techniques, all the things you were saying, tools, looking at what lurks in the shadows. That's a psychotherapist. And a psychologist, any guesses? Psychologist, somebody, if you go to a psychologist, they are the masters of the diagnosis. They can't prescribe, but they can diagnose. And they're actually very trained in diagnosis. A lot of, especially children with a lot of issues around, you've heard a lot about sort of different neurological issues that children are facing, whether it's attention deficit disorder, and there's a whole politics around that and how that's overdiagnosed. But psychologists are trained to diagnose. Yeah. So psychotherapists are kind of the fringe. We're pushed in the mainstream. We're left wing. We're pushed out of the mainstream. Psychiatrists and psychologists are the mainstream clinicians. But we take a 5-minute break and then come back because I have a little exercise for you, and that will get you energized and throw you in a good way.
Okay.